I have signed my name under 411 verdicts. I remember the number the way some men remember their children's birthdays, because for 31 years, those signatures were the closest thing I had to a soul. And there's exactly one of them. I would give back everything I owned to erase. The house, the pension, the little bronze plaque they screwed to the courthouse wall the day I retired. All of it, gone, if it meant I could unsign the name I wrote on the 17th of October, 1988, on the sheet of paper that sent a 24-year-old man named Daniel Reyes to prison for the rest of his natural life. Because 2 weeks ago, a woman I had never met sat across from me at my own kitchen table, slid a single manila folder toward me, and said 7 words that took the floor out from under my feet. Your Honor, you convicted the wrong man. I want to tell you I argued. I want to tell you I stood up, straightened my back the way I used to straighten it when a lawyer got too clever in my courtroom, and told her she didn't understand how careful we were, how many safeguards there were, how impossible it would be for a mistake like that to slip past me. That's what the old judge in me wanted to say. But I didn't say any of it, because the moment I opened that folder and saw the second name printed on the lab report, a name I had also known, a name that had sat in my courtroom on the other side of the aisle, I understood all at once that I had spent 36 years being proud of the worst thing I ever did. Let me take you back, and I'll tell you exactly how a careful man convinces himself he cannot be wrong. Because that's the real story here, not the DNA, the certainty. In the fall of 1988, I was 43 years old, and I thought I was very good at my job. I had been on the bench for 6 years. I came up as a prosecutor before that, and I carried the prosecutor's instinct with me under my robe, the way you carry an old injury. You don't feel it most days, but it changes the way you walk. I believed, deep down, in a way I would never have admitted out loud, that the people who ended up in front of me were usually there for a reason. Not always, but usually. And usually is a poison when you're the one holding the gavel, because it means that every single defendant starts the day already a little bit guilty in the private courtroom behind your eyes. The case was the killing of a girl named Emily Sauer. She was 19. She worked the register at a hardware store off Route 9, and on a Tuesday night in March, somebody followed her out to the gravel lot behind the building, and she never made it to her car. She was found the next morning by the man who came to open the store. I won't describe what he found. I've spent 36 years trying to unsee the photographs, and I'm not going to hand them to you. The town wanted an answer. You have to understand what that pressure feels like from the inside. A young woman is dead. Everybody's daughter is suddenly unsafe. The newspaper runs her yearbook photo every single day. And the phone in the district attorney's office does not stop ringing. Nobody says the words, "Just give us somebody." Nobody has to. The pressure isn't a voice. It's a temperature. It raises the temperature in every room until finding an answer feels like the same thing as finding the truth. And they found Daniel Reyes. Daniel had a record. Small things. A stolen car when he was 19, a bar fight, a couple of months for possession. He was the kind of young man a small town has already decided about long before anything actually happens. He'd been seen at the hardware store that week. He'd bought a length of rope and a box of screws 2 days before the murder, which is the single most ordinary purchase a person can make, and also, when you lay it next to a dead girl, the most damning. There was a witness, a man named Carl Whitmore, who said he saw a car like Daniel's in the lot that night, and there was a smear of blood on a work glove found in a dumpster 40 feet from the body, and the blood was type O, and Daniel was type O, and so was roughly 40% of the human race. But nobody in that courtroom wanted to hear the second half of that sentence. I want to stop right here because this is the part people never understand about wrongful convictions. They imagine a villain. They imagine a crooked cop planting evidence, a prosecutor hiding a file, a judge taking a bribe. And sometimes, God help us, that's exactly what it is. But most of the time, it's nothing so dramatic. Most of the time, it's a room full of decent, tired, frightened people, all of them slightly leaning in the same direction, and not one of them doing anything you could point to and call a crime. That's how Daniel Reyes went to prison. Not because anyone hated him, because everyone, including me, wanted the story to be finished. The trial lasted 9 days. I remember Daniel's mother sat in the second row every single one of them, in the same gray coat, with her hands folded in her lap like she was in church. I remember she never once cried out, never made a scene. And at the time, I read that as coldness. I thought, there's a woman who knows what her son is. It did not occur to me, not for 1 second in 9 days, that she was silent because she was watching something monstrous happen very slowly, and had already learned that no one in that room could hear her. Daniel took the stand in his own defense, which his lawyer should never have let him do. He was angry. Innocent men, it turns out, are often angry because they cannot understand why the obvious truth isn't obvious to everyone else. And that anger reads to a jury as exactly the thing you'd expect from a killer. When the prosecutor asked him where he was that night, he said he was home, alone, and there was nobody to prove it. When the prosecutor asked him about the rope, he lost his temper. It's a hardware store, he said. People buy rope. That's what it's for. And he was right. He was completely, plainly right. And I watched the jury flinch away from him anyway, because he'd raised his voice, and I felt, I'm ashamed of this. I felt a small satisfaction. There he is, I thought. There's the temper. There was a moment in that trial that I have gone back to more than any other. And at the time, it passed so quickly that I nearly missed it. And now I understand it was the whole case turning on a hinge no wider than a breath. Daniel's lawyer, a young public defender named Ross, overworked, carrying more files than any human being should, put up a single alibi witness, a neighbor, an older woman who lived in the apartment below Daniel and swore she heard him come home that night around 9, heard his footsteps, heard his television through the floor the way she heard it every night. The prosecutor took her apart in about 4 minutes. Was she sure of the date? Couldn't it have been a different Tuesday? Did she look at a clock? She hadn't looked at a clock. Who looks at a clock in their own living room? And so her testimony evaporated, not because it was false, but because it was ordinary, because the truth is almost always ordinary and has no clock and no proof, while a lie can be built with corners and edges and a timestamp. I watched that woman get dismantled for telling the truth, and I thought, privately, that Ross was scraping the bottom of the barrel. That's the phrase I used in my own head, scraping the bottom of the barrel. She was the truth, and I filed her under desperation. And then there was Carl. I have to tell you about watching Carl Whitmore testify, because it is the single most important thing I ever failed to see. He came in wearing a pressed shirt. He'd cut himself shaving, and there was a little square of tissue on his jaw. And I remember thinking that was almost endearing, a nervous man trying to look right for the court. He answered every question in a low, steady, sorrowful voice. He said he wished he'd done more that night, that he'd seen the car and thought nothing of it, and that he'd have to live with that. He even teared up, once, carefully, when the prosecutor asked him about Emily, whom he claimed to have known a little from around town. The jury loved him. I loved him. He was everything Daniel wasn't. Calm, humble, wounded, sorry. And every ounce of that sorrow was real, I realize now, because he had every reason to be sorry. He wasn't performing grief. He was feeling it, and letting us believe it pointed the other way. The most convincing witness I ever saw in 31 years was the murderer, grieving his own victim in my courtroom, and using that grief to bury an innocent man. I have never in my life been so completely, so serenely fooled. And the reason I was fooled is that he behaved exactly the way I believed an innocent man should behave. And Daniel behaved exactly the way I believed a guilty one would. My whole theory of human character, the instinct I'd sharpened for 20 years, was not just wrong. It was precisely, surgically inverted. The forensics didn't help Daniel either. And here's a thing about 1988 that people forget. There was no defense expert. There was no one to stand up and say that type O blood means almost nothing, that 40% of the town would match, that a smear on a glove in a dumpster is not the same as a hand on a throat. The state's analyst said, consistent with the defendant. And the jury heard, it was him, because consistent with is a phrase built by scientists to be honest, and heard by ordinary people to be certain. Nobody in that room, including me, made them understand the difference. I let a probability walk into my courtroom dressed as a fact, and I held the door for it. The jury was out for 6 hours. When they came back and the foreman said the word Guilty. Daniel didn't shout. He turned around and looked for his mother. And when he found her, he mouthed something to her. And to this day, I don't know what it was. And I have thought about it 10,000 times. Then it was my turn. Sentencing. And this is the part I have to tell you slowly because this is the part I have never forgiven myself for. I could have given him a number. 25 years. 30. Something with a horizon. Something a man could survive toward. Instead, I gave a speech. I remember I was proud of it at the time. I talked about the sanctity of a young life cut short, about a community that needed to feel safe again, about the responsibility of a court to answer savagery with certainty. And then I gave Daniel Reyes life without the possibility of parole. And I said, looking right at him, that I did it without a shred of doubt. Without a shred of doubt. Do you understand what a terrible thing that is for a man in my position to say out loud? A shred of doubt was the only honest thing in that entire courtroom. And I stood up and denied it existed, because denying it felt like strength, because the town wanted a man without doubt, because I wanted, more than I wanted to be right, to be the kind of judge who was never wrong. And when you want that badly enough, you stop being able to tell the difference between certainty and courage. They start to feel like the same muscle. Daniel's mother stood up as the bailiffs took him out. She didn't scream. She said one sentence clearly into the quiet of the room, and the court reporter took it down, and I have the transcript, and I can quote it to you from memory. She said, "One day you will know, and you will have to live in the same body that did this." Then she sat back down and folded her hands, and I moved on to my next case, and I did not think about her again for a very long time. And there is one more thing from those years I have to confess, because if I'm going to sit here and tell you the truth about certainty, then I have to tell you the part that proves I could have known sooner and chose not to. His mother wrote to me. Not once, many times. The letters started about a year after the sentencing, and they came on and off for more than 2 decades. They came to the courthouse, addressed to me by name, in that same careful handwriting, and my clerk would set them in a small stack with the others. The cranks, the prisoners insisting on their innocence, the families who couldn't accept the verdict. Every judge gets them. You learn early to not read them, because if you read them, you can't do the job. That's the wisdom they hand you. Don't look back. The case is closed. Reading the letters of the people you've sentenced is a kind of self-harm, they tell you. And it's dressed up as professionalism. And I wore it like everyone else. I read one of them. Only one in all those years. It was maybe 1996. I don't know why I opened that particular envelope on that particular afternoon. I think I was tired and lonely, and Marion was out of town, and the office was quiet. Mrs. Reyes wrote in plain sentences. She didn't beg. She didn't threaten. She laid out point by point the things that had never sat right with her about the case. The neighbor who heard the television, the fact that Daniel had no history of violence toward women, the way the witness's story had shifted between the first police statement and the trial. And she closed with a line I put out of my mind for 28 years, and that came roaring back the day Priya opened her folder. She wrote, "I am not asking you to be sorry. I am asking you to be unsure. That is all I have ever asked. Just be unsure and look again." Be unsure and look again. I folded that letter up and I put it back in its envelope and I filed it with the others. And I told myself it was the well-argued grief of a mother who would say anything. And I did not look again. I had the exact instruction. I had it in my hands, in '96, from the only person who was right. And I set it down because looking again would have meant admitting that my certainty in 1988 might have been a feeling and not a fact. And I was not willing at 51 years old to pay that price. So Daniel served another 28 years while the answer sat in a box 100 yards from the letter. And both of them waited for a man who had decided, as a matter of professional wisdom, not to look. That is the thing I will answer for, not the verdict. Verdicts are what a system produces. The letter is what a man ignored. I told myself I forgot Daniel Reyes because there were 400 other cases. That's a lie. I didn't forget him. I filed him. There's a difference. Forgetting is when a thing leaves you. Filing is when you build a small, locked room for a thing and then walk past that door every day for 36 years telling yourself it's empty. The years went by the way years do. My kids grew up. My wife, Marion, got sick in 2001, and I spent 3 years learning how to lose her slowly. And when she was gone, I retired. Because a courtroom is no place for a man who has started to understand what it actually costs to be wrong about a person. They gave me the plaque. They gave me a dinner. A young judge stood up and called me a model of judicial certainty. And everyone applauded, and I smiled. And somewhere in a cell 300 miles away, a man was 50 years old now, and had spent more than half his life inside a mistake with my signature on it. Now here is where the story turns. And I need you to stay with me because what happened next did not happen because of me. I want that on the record. I did not go looking for the truth. The truth came looking for me, and it very nearly didn't find me in time. Her name is Priya Chandra. She runs a small legal clinic, 3 lawyers and a rotating crop of law students that does nothing but re-examine old convictions. They live off grants and stubbornness. And about a year ago, a law student in her clinic, a 23-year-old kid named Marcus, pulled the Reyes file for a class project, the way you'd pull any dusty old case. And something in it wouldn't let him put it back down. It was the glove, the work glove with the type O blood. In 1988, type O blood was the end of the analysis. That's all the science could do. But the physical evidence in an unusual number of old cases in our county had never been destroyed. It sat in cardboard boxes in a climate-controlled evidence room because a records clerk in the 90s had been too much of a rule follower to throw anything away. That clerk, a woman named Doris, whose name appears nowhere in any of the headlines, is a hero of this story and will never be thanked. And I want to say it here so it's written down somewhere. Doris, thank you. So the glove still existed. And on that glove, 36 years later, there was still enough biological material to do the thing that could not be done in 1988. They could sequence it. They could read the actual person written into that blood. Priya's clinic filed a motion for DNA testing. The current district attorney fought it. I want you to sit with that for a second because I did. The current DA, a man who was in grade school when I sentenced Daniel, fought for 8 months to prevent anyone from testing the evidence. Not because he thought Daniel was guilty, because if Daniel was innocent, it would be, in his words to the court, a destabilizing event for public confidence in past verdicts. He said the quiet part in a legal filing. He argued in writing that it was better for the public to believe in a false conviction than to know about a real mistake. And a part of me, the old part, the part that gave the speech about certainty, understood exactly what he meant. That's the part of me I've been at war with for 2 weeks. The judge who heard the motion, a woman half my age, thank God, ordered the testing. And when the results came back, Priya Chandra did something she did not have to do. She could have gone straight to the press. She could have held a conference on the courthouse steps and named me. Instead, she got in her car and drove 2 hours to my house and sat at my kitchen table. Because, she told me later, she thought the man who signed the verdict deserved to hear it from a person and not from a reporter. I did not deserve that kindness. She gave it to me anyway. I am learning late that this is what actual justice looks like, and that it looks almost nothing like what I did for 31 years. She opened the folder. The DNA on the glove was not Daniel Reyes. I had braced for that. I had, in some cowardly corner of myself, half known it was coming from the moment she said the wrong man. What I had not braced for, what nobody warned me about, what took the floor right out from under me, was the second page. Because when you exclude one person, sometimes you also find another. The sample was clean enough and complete enough that they ran it against the state database. It matched. The blood on the glove that killed Emily Sauer belonged to Carl Whitmore. Carl Whitmore. The witness. The man who took the stand in my courtroom, put his hand on the Bible, and told the jury he saw a car like Daniel's in the lot that night. He wasn't confused. He wasn't mistaken. He was the killer. And he walked into my courtroom and helped me put the blame on someone else. And I looked at that man. I looked right at him. And I found him credible. I remember writing the word in my own notes. Credible. He was calm, you see. He didn't have a temper. He didn't raise his voice. Everything that made Daniel look guilty to me, Carl had the sense to do the opposite of. The guilty man was calm, and the innocent man was furious. And I, the careful judge, the model of certainty, I sorted them exactly backwards and called it judgment. Carl Whitmore died in 2009. Heart attack in his own bed, a free man, 61 years old with grandchildren. He is beyond any punishment I could ever have given him. That's a particular kind of horror I didn't know existed until 2 weeks ago. To finally solve the thing and find that the answer is already in the ground, and that the only living people left to feel the full weight of it are the ones who were innocent all along, and me. There's a family in this too that I have not been able to face, and I owe them a sentence even though I can barely write it. Emily Sauer had a younger sister. She was 14 when Emily died, and she is 50 now. And for 36 years, she believed the man who killed her sister was locked away, and she built whatever peace a person can build on that foundation. And 2 weeks ago, a stranger's phone call took that foundation out from under her too. Because it wasn't just Daniel I got wrong. When you convict the innocent man, you don't only ruin his life. You also hand the victim's family a lie to grieve around, and you let the guilty man go home. And years later, when it all comes apart, every single one of those people has to bury their dead a second time. Emily's sister has to know now that the man who did it lived out a full, free life 2 towns over, died comfortably, and was never touched. I did that. My certainty didn't just cost Daniel 36 years. It cost her the truth for the same 36 years, and it let her sister's killer grow old in peace. There is no plaque on a courthouse wall that balances against that. I asked Priya the only question that mattered. I asked if Daniel was still alive. He is. He is 60 years old. He has been in prison for 36 years for a murder committed by the man who testified against him. His mother, the woman in the gray coat, the woman who said I would have to live in the same body that did this. She died 4 years ago. She never got to see it. She spent the last 32 years of her life writing letters to anyone who would open an envelope and being called, by people like me, a mother in denial about what her son was. She was the only person in that entire courtroom who knew the truth from the first day to the last, and every single one of us treated her certainty as delusion and my certainty as wisdom. I've started to think the whole machinery of what I call justice was, at its core, just a very expensive way of deciding which people were allowed to believe. There was a hearing, of course. There had to be, to make it official, to vacate the conviction I'd handed down. And I did something that surprised even me. I called the current DA, the one who'd fought the testing for 8 months, and I told him that if he stood up in that courtroom and dragged his feet on Daniel's release for one single day, for 1 hour, to protect public confidence, I would sit in the front row of every press event for the rest of my life and tell every reporter in the state exactly how much easier it is to convict an innocent man than to admit you have. He released Daniel the following week. Turns out public confidence is very flexible when the alternative is being the villain in the old judge's story. They asked me if I wanted to attend the hearing. I almost didn't go. What right does the man who did it have to show up for the undoing? But I went, because hiding from it felt like one more comfortable choice in a life full of them. And I have made my last comfortable choice. I sat in the back. I watched a young judge say the words I should have said 36 years ago. The conviction is vacated. The defendant is released. The court apologizes. And I watched Daniel Reyes stand up in a suit that didn't fit him, a 60-year-old man who went in at 24. And I watched him look around the room for his mother out of 36 years of habit and not find her. And remember, all over again, in front of everyone, that she was gone. That was the moment. Not the DNA, not the second name on the report, that. A man looking for his mother in a room where she died waiting. I don't know what I expected to do afterward. I think some cowardly part of me had a fantasy of forgiveness, that I'd approach him and say I was sorry, and he'd say something that would let me set down the thing I've been carrying. That's not what happened, and thank God, because it would have been one more thing I took from him. I did approach him. I told him who I was. He knew already. He'd known my name for 36 years the way I should have known his. I said I was sorry. It was the smallest, most useless word in the language, and it was all I had. He looked at me for a long time, and then he said something I did not expect, something I've been turning over every hour since. He said, "You know what the worst part was? It wasn't the years. You get used to the years. The worst part was that you said it without a shred of doubt. If you just said you weren't sure, if you just looked at me one time like maybe you had it wrong, I could have held on to that in there. But you were so sure. You made everybody else sure. Your being sure is the wall they built around me. I have replayed that 1,000 times. My certainty was the wall, not the evidence, not the witness. Me, standing up straight, denying the one honest thing in the room, because doubt felt like weakness, and I wanted to be strong for a frightened town. I gave them the certainty they wanted, and the price of that certainty was 36 years of another man's life. And I never once, in all those years, considered that the doubt I was so proud of overcoming might have been the truth trying to reach me. Here's what I understand now at 79 years old that I did not understand at 43. Certainty is not the same thing as being right. It never was. Certainty is just a feeling, and it is strongest, always strongest, in exactly the moments when we most want a hard question to be over. The town wanted the killing solved. I wanted to be the judge who solved it. Carl Whitmore wanted to not be caught. And Daniel Reyes wanted, simply, for someone to look at him and wonder if, just maybe, he was telling the truth. 4 wants in one room. And the system I served with my whole heart was built, it turns out, to satisfy every one of those wants except the last one. Daniel's out now. The state gave him a check, a number with a lot of zeros that is supposed to stand in for 36 years, as if any number could. He's living with a cousin 2 states away. He's learning how to use a phone that fits in his pocket. He told a reporter he goes outside 4 or 5 times a day just to stand in an unlocked doorway, because for a long time he wasn't sure he ever would again. He has not forgiven me, and he has told me plainly that he isn't going to, and he's right not to. And I've stopped asking, because asking a man you've wronged to relieve you of the weight is just theft with better manners. I drove out to see him once, about a month after the release. I don't fully know why I went. I told myself I was bringing him something. His mother's letters, all of them, the ones the courthouse had kept in storage. I'd gotten them released to me, box after box, and I'd read every one before I gave them over, which was the hardest week of my life, and the least I could do. 22 years of a woman writing into a silence, and I'd been the silence. I thought Daniel should have them. I thought they belonged to him. His cousin's house is small and clean, and there's a screen door that bangs. Daniel came out onto the porch, and he didn't invite me in, and I didn't expect him to. He looked at the box in my hands, and he knew what it was before I said anything. And something moved across his face that I don't have a word for. He took the box, he set it down on the porch railing, and he didn't open it. We stood there a while. Somewhere a lawnmower was going. He told me a few things in no order, the way a man does when he's decided to say true things to someone he doesn't like. He told me that for the first 10 years, he'd hated me with a purity that kept him alive. That hating the judge was easier than hating the whole blind machine, because a machine has no face and I had a face. He told me that his mother visited every month for as long as her health let her, and that she never once, not one single visit, talked to him as if he might be guilty. And that her certainty, her real certainty, the kind built on knowing a person and not on a temperature in a town, was the only wall that held him up, while my certainty was the wall that held him down. 2 walls, he said, hers and mine. And he lived his whole adult life pressed between them. Then he said the thing I carry now instead of the fantasy of forgiveness I'd driven out there hoping for. He said, I'm not going to tell you it's okay, because it isn't. And you'd feel better, and you don't get to feel better. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can go make it so the next one gets looked at. That's the only thing you can do that means anything. Being sorry to me is just more of you needing something from me. Go be useful to somebody who's still inside. And he picked up the box of his mother's letters and he went in the house, and the screen door banged, and that was the last time I saw him until the day at the legislature. I sat in my car in front of that little house for a long time before I could drive. I thought about the current DA who'd fought the testing for 8 months, and I understood, finally and completely, that he and I were the same man at different ages. Both of us protecting the comfort of the certain over the freedom of one human being. Both of us calling our cowardice public confidence and the finality of verdicts, and every other clean phrase the law hands you to hide behind. The only difference between us is that I got shown the box. He hasn't been shown his yet. God help him when he is. But he let me do one thing. He let me testify. There's a bill moving through the state legislature right now. Priya's clinic is behind it. That would require the preservation of physical evidence in every serious case and would guarantee any convicted person the right to DNA testing that didn't exist when they were tried. The kind of testing that freed Daniel almost didn't happen because the evidence almost got thrown away and because a DA fought for 8 months to keep it in the box. The bill would make the box open by law. And they asked the old judge, the model of judicial certainty, the man whose signature is on 411 verdicts, to come and tell the committee, in his own words, how a careful man convicts an innocent one and feels proud doing it. So I did. I sat at the witness table, in the room where I used to be the one asking the questions, and I told them everything I've told you. I told them about the temperature in the town. I told them about the anger that reads as guilt and the calm that reads as innocence, and how exactly, precisely wrong those instincts can be. I told them, I said, without a shred of doubt, to a man I had every reason to doubt, and that my certainty became the wall around his life. And a legislator, a young one, asked me the question I'd been dreading. He asked, Judge, with all your experience, how are we supposed to know when we've got it wrong? And I told him the truth. I said, you start by being suspicious of the moments you feel most sure, not the moments you feel confused, the moments you feel certain. Because doubt is not the enemy of justice. Doubt is the last thing standing between justice and a man in a gray suit looking for his dead mother in the back of a courtroom. I spent 31 years treating doubt as a weakness to be overcome. It was the only friend the truth ever had in my courtroom, and I threw it out of the room every single time it tried to speak. The room was very quiet after that. The way my courtroom used to be quiet. I used to love that silence. I thought it was respect. I understand now it was just people, holding their breath, hoping the man with the power would use it carefully. I didn't, often enough. I'm telling you so that maybe, in some room I'll never see, someone with the power will hold a case a little longer and let the doubt speak and look at the angry, innocent man one more time before they're sure. I have signed my name 411 times. I lie awake now and I do the arithmetic. If I got one this wrong, one that I was proud of, one I gave a speech about, one I was so sure of that I denied doubt existed, then how many of the other 410 were built on the same certainty, the same temperature, the same backwards instinct about who gets to be believed? I don't know. That's the answer, and it's the worst one. I don't know. And I'll never know about most of them because most of them didn't have a work glove sitting in a box that a stubborn clerk refused to throw away. Priya's clinic is going through my old cases now, all of them. I gave them everything, my notes, my calendars, the private ones, the ones I'm ashamed of. Because the only thing I have left to offer is to hold the door open for the doubt I spent a career locking out. If there's another Daniel Reyes in those 410, I want to be alive to sit in the back of that room too and watch the conviction get vacated and not look away from it, even the part where they can't find the person who waited for them. I'm an old man. I don't have many verdicts left in me, but I've got one finally, and I got it 36 years too late. And I'll say it now the way I should have said it then, with the humility I mistook for weakness my whole life. I was wrong. I was sure, and I was wrong. And I will spend whatever's left of me learning the difference. And if you take one thing from an old judge who ruined a good man's life with the strength of his own conviction, let it be this. The moment you feel most certain that you understand another person, that you know what they are, that you've seen their kind before, that the story is finished, that is the exact moment to stop and look again and let yourself doubt. Everything I ever got wrong, I got wrong while I was certain. And a man named Daniel Reyes spent 36 years inside my certainty, waiting for me to feel the one thing I was too proud to feel. I feel it now. It's the only thing I have left to give him, and it's 36 years too late, and I'm giving it anyway. To him. To his mother in the gray coat. Wherever the certain and the doubtful go when it's finally over. And to you, whoever you are, the next time you're sure. Be less sure. It's the whole thing. It's the only lesson I have. Be less sure. and look one more time, and you might not have to spend the end of your life the way I'm spending mine, signing your name over and over in the dark, under a verdict you can never take back.